Okay, let's accomplish some curves without pins or basting. And that's all about how you handle the fabric as you feed it through the machine, just as we did with the straight stitch. It's just a little bit different. And so what we've created here for you is kind of an S-curve piece of fabric. And there's two pieces put together, and they actually have those little slit notches that I told you about. So we lay those together so they're nice and even. And what we're going to do is practice an inside curve and an outside curve. And you can actually go around this several times until you really feel you've gotten the comfort level that you need before you start doing it with an actual garment or project. So first I want to discuss the inside curve. I was so surprised to hear how many people accomplish an inside curve by straightening it out as they stitch. In order to get that straight seam allowance is the reason they tell me that they do that. Also, I have actually had students tell me they were taught that that's the way to do it. I will imagine people do that because they're sewing on those really small sewing machine beds and they have no way to manipulate this. When you see how we're going to just smoothly move this, because we have this flat table surface and we're not fighting against anything, you're going to automatically understand why sewing on the flat surface and not sewing with your machine on top of a table is so much better. So we're going to just honor the curve. This is the key. So that means the way it was cut is the way it should be sewn, not straightening it out or stretching it in any way. And the reason you don't want to straighten that out and stretch it is because you're going to misshape it. So you misshape it, then stitch it into that misshaped place. So now the fabric is not going to lay as flat, and if it's a neckline on, say, a collarless garment, it's going to be all wonky and not lay as smooth and flat as you really want it to. So we'll start out, as always, with the little back tack, and then just watch. As we curve through here, we just honor the curve and move the fabric through the machine so that it stays on that level. But now we're going to come to an outside curve. And when you get to the outside curve, this is where most seamstresses, and I know I used to have the problem too, you get going on the curve and you get almost through the curve and you think, I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it, and sure enough, at some point you have to stop because you're going to go right off the edge, you're losing the seam allowance. And those of you who've sewn outside curves, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So then you reach back and you lift the foot up and readjust, and you move a little further and lift the foot up and readjust. Well, what happens every time you do that, you get in a little wonkiness to your curve. It's not that clean contour that it was cut at. So in order to do that, we're going to use our left hand to feed the fabric through the machine as we curve it. So I'm going to take my left hand like this, and I'm going to slightly pull back on the fabric with my index finger as I turn this. So I'm going to come into that curve, and then as I come around the curve, my hand will automatically turn right on that curve. And now I'm working at one with the sewing machine, and I haven't had to stop, and now I have this beautiful curve. I want you to see that. So I'll take it out of the machine. And as you can see, we have this perfect curve and we didn't have to stop once. You'll need to practice that a little bit, but it's just like two wheels working together in a machine. As you sew, your hand will turn, and it'll be so automatic you'll be surprised at how quickly you pick up on that. So it's just about following that curve, getting that nice smooth line, and now your garment's going to look the very best it can. And it was just that easy. We didn't have to put any pins in, we didn't have to baste it together, we didn't have to do any special prep to keep it the way we wanted it. Just that easy. So now let's talk about the curves like this. We have this little curved pocket, and it's a little pocket piece, and I've just kind of finger pressed the hem over. Obviously, if I'm going to make this pocket, I'm going to hem it first before I attach it to the garment. But for this, I just want this to be the exercise for you and I, so just press that over anyway, iron, fingers. You can put the hem in if you like, but what I want to show you is a technique called crimping. And what crimping is going to do, it's going to allow us to have the exact shape curve on the right side as we have on the left side. Again, so many times we get just about so far around and then we have to stop and pick up the foot and go up and down. And pretty soon you might have a really nice right curve, but the left curve's not quite the same symmetry. And pockets really are very obvious on a garment. So we want to make sure that we get the same shaped curve on both sides. So we're going to do a little trick called crimping. And you may have seen or heard of this before. And you'll need to either use your finger at the back of the foot or a tool. Now your point turner could work back here. I have used just about everything you can think of because I get a little lazy, and if I don't have it here, what I need, I just grab whatever I can find next to the machine and stick it back there. But basically, it can just be just about anything. In this case, I'm going to put my finger back here. Some machines have a slanted foot, and if it has a slanted foot, you will not be able to use your finger, so you'll have to use a tool. But whatever you use, what we're going to do is we're going to hold this, and we're going to stitch this, and we have to keep an accurate seam allowance, so our curves will be the same. So again, we're going to use our left hand to curve through this, and as you can see, I'm holding the back of the fabric of the pocket as if I don't want it to go through. You see what a big bunched up mess this is. Well, watch what happens when I let go of it. Do you see how there's some fine, tiny little pleats in there? I kind of think it looks like cupcake paper liners, where they're just little tiny, tiny little pleats in there. So we're going to go right around here, maintaining our 1/4 of an inch. In this case, I'm going to maintain a 1/4 of an inch. If you're doing this on a pocket for a garment, you want to be just slightly under the seam allowance. So if the seam allowance was 3/8, this 1/4 would probably be just exactly what we need. All right, so I'm going to come around here, and what you do is you hold it on there as long as you possibly can, and if you have to let go, then you grab some more of the fabric and hold it up there against the foot again. And I always go way beyond the curve, because if you stop right at the end of the curve, you may not have enough crimping. And here's the thing, it doesn't matter what stitch length you use, it isn't permanent. It's not stitched in there. Actually, the crimping is caused by the feed dog, not the stitching. So it doesn't matter what stitch length you use. But I want you to just take a look quickly at this. Do you see how it already has cupped it up and curved it? And it looks very symmetrical already. Now what I will do next is I'll go to the ironing station, and right on the outside of that stitching line, I'm going to just touch it with the end of the tip of the iron to press all the way around this curve. And this is how it will come out, and you can see how symmetrical that curve is in there. Now I can just get a nice flat press on it, put it on the garment, and sew it down. So that's taking in all that excess, and you don't have any little lumps and bumps, and your curves are symmetrical. All right, let's go on to an A-line skirt. So here we have a little miniature A-line skirt. And I remember when I was a teenager, that was one of the things we made a lot. I'll probably be giving away my age there, but I'm a child of the 60s, and we made a lot of A-line skirts back there. And it was in style, and it was a simple garment to make for your first few garments. But when you got to the hem, because it's A-line, the hem is wider, has more fabric than what you have to sew it to, right? So, because of the angle. So what we would do is we would try to take tiny little pleats as we went along to try and pull all that fabric in. But what would inevitably happen is you'd turn it over on the right side, and when you pressed it, those bumps would show. And it wasn't quite that extra special look that you wanted to get. And I wish I had known this technique back then. So what I've done with this, and this is just like, again, a little miniature, I have pressed up the hem. And on this piece, I pressed up 1 inch. Okay, so I've got that all pressed up, and now I'm going to crimp right close to the raw edge of the hem. And this can be done if you're going to machine stitch the hem, hand stitch the hem, and even if you're going to put seam binding on the hem. So we're just going to hold that like we did before, go right along that edge. And if you're going to double turn this hem, if you're going to turn that edge under, you want that stitching line when you're crimping to be where you're going to turn it. But what you'll see here is that pulls right up there. Now you see how it's almost too short? Well, it will just smooth right out to the exact place you want it, because again, this isn't permanently stitched in there. And then you'll press it and your hem will be beautiful and there'll be no lumps and bumps. Okay? And I want to just show you one more instance for using the crimping, and it's a shirt tail hem. Now, if you've ever made a shirt tail hem, you know how much trouble it can give you because it is a strong curve in one area. And I know people fight with this, and one of the things that they might do often is stitch it from the wrong side. So they'll go to the pressing station and they'll press it up and they'll double press it. What happens when you do that, you can very easily stretch it out because this curve is a bias now. And we know bias stretches more than straight of the grain or cross grain. So we want to be very careful of that bias. And if you're steaming and pressing and turning with your fingers, chances are you're going to stretch it out. Now you're going to have even more fabric to work into a smaller area than you did before. So what I've done is I've stitched my seam allowance of my shirt tail hem. I've stitched my seam allowance right up to where the shirt tail splits, okay? And then I've pressed up 5/8 all the way around, only pressing on the turned edge. Don't press this area, okay? So now we're going to crimp, and we're going to crimp, I'll crimp this side. We're going to crimp right at about 1/4 inch. We've got a 5/8 inch seam allowance because generally a side seam is a 5/8 inch seam allowance, which contours right into the shirt tail hem. So that's going to be 5/8 as well. So now we're going to just crimp this curve. Remember, it's really key to stay accurate with this curve. So use that left hand to turn that. Crimp beyond the curve just to be safe. Now, the way that we're going to put our hem in is from the right side. Why are we going to stitch from the right side, you might ask? I can't see what I'm doing. Well, the reason we're going to stitch from the right side is because we have all that excess fabric that we're trying to ease into that hem. And the way to do that is to let the feed dog do that work for us instead of the other way and the feed dog are working against us. Because if I turned this over and I tried to stitch it from this side, now I'm easing the smaller to the bigger. I'm causing myself so much trouble. This hem is never going to look right. The other problem with a hem that is stitched from the wrong side, and probably many of you have had this problem, had a shirt tail hem that always curled up, and no matter what you did, you pressed it, you stretched it, you pull on it, the whole time you're wearing it, because every time you look in the mirror it's curled up, chances are it was stitched from the wrong side, which again, that easing caused it to curl up. We want our hem to curl in toward the body, so we're going to stitch it from the right side. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on that 1/4 inch stitching and turn once and then turn it right on that folded edge. So now we have this double fold. We're going to put it under the machine and stitch from the right side. Now this only takes a little bit of practice to figure out where that edge is and to try and hit. Your goal is to hit right on the folded edge. And of course you'll say, well, I could definitely do that if I sewed it from the wrong side. But the problem with sewing it from the wrong side, like we said, is that you're going to contour it and you're going to be fighting. You're going to contour it in the wrong direction and you're going to be fighting the feed dog. So take a look here. What I'm doing is I'm folding it just past that stitching on the crimping and then push that crimping up into the curve. Get in there. All right, bring it over. Hold it like we talked about, thumb under, fingers on top, and shoot for that folded edge. Stitching right up to where you're holding it, then come back, give yourself a little bit of room to turn under the next area. Okay, we really want to honor that curve. Keep working your way around. And again, on a full-size shirt, the curve isn't quite as severe. So if you can do it on this little sample piece, the shirt's going to be a piece of cake for you. The main thing is we just want a nice smooth curve. We don't want a bunch of lumps and bumps that could be caused if we tried pressing the hem into place. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. I'll stop there and let you take a look at how smooth that curve is. If it's a little too short, that's okay because it is not permanent. You can just smooth it right out to get it to the exact length that you want, but you won't have any lumps or bumps when you turn it over to the right side. So that's it for curves.